Do that, please mute your microphones, although we may have slides that I know I have a slide that I'll pause on to ask for any feedback, but in general, please keep your microphone muted because this presentation will be recorded, so we want the sound quality to be as good as possible. Thanks. So thanks very much for joining us today. Summer and I are pleased to present to you on the topic of predatory journals and questionable conferences to give us a chance to explain how to identify and avoid low-quality publications and conferences in your work. If you haven't come across a predatory journal or a questionable conference yet, you definitely will. These are poor quality publications and events that are a significant factor in the scholarly publication and dissemination process, and they can also be a significant factor in the research process as well. So our aim today is to describe these poor quality events and opportunities and to give you the tools to recognize them and to avoid them. So I'll be speaking to the first set of objectives here under what are predatory journals. Oh, I'm sorry, I should pause to introduce myself in Summer. So I'm Mike Sainsbury, a librarian at Saskatoon Campus Library. My involvement in predatory journals comes out of my work helping instructors here at Sask Polytech as they look for places to offer the research that they've written for publication. So a question I get asked is, where can I publish this? Can you help me find an appropriate journal for it? So I'll talk a bit about that later. I've got a tool that can help with that. So I'll be talking about how to identify predatory journals and how to avoid them. And my colleague Summer from the Office of Applied Research and Innovation will be looking at questionable conferences and same objectives there, how to identify them and how to avoid them. So as we get started, this is one of those opportunities to unmute your microphone so that we can hear from you to tell us what you already may know or have experienced about predatory journals and questionable conferences. So the floor is open. I should also say, if you use your chat box, because I only have one screen, Summer will be able to see your chats and read them. But if you'd like to participate verbally, please just unmute your mic and let us know if you've either had some experience with these issues or not.
Mike, I think on a daily, it's Madeline.
Yeah.
On a daily basis, I get emails from journals and conferences all over the world. And I think that most of those emails are not good journals,
Okay.
or good conferences.
Mm-hmm. So you would agree that it is, if you're getting this daily, a significant factor in the scholarly process?
Yeah, yeah. And they've tagged me from previous publications.
Okay.
In journals that I'm aware of.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we do find that most instructors have come across these if they have been involved in research previously. The issue becomes how to sort out which ones are legitimate from the ones that aren't. So we'll get into how to identify the predatory journals. So why are they called predatory? The slide I have here has a lot of information in it, so I just want to unpack it, but this kind of represents the key to the problem. So the infographic on the left explains the standard for-profit publishing model where faculty in the top row of this graphic do research and write up their reports for articles for publication. Those articles then are in traditional publishing or previous to an open access model, which I'll get into. Those articles traditionally then were offered to an appropriate journal which was generally owned by a for-profit scholarly publishing company. Copyright would be assigned to the publisher, and then they would, in effect, look after things for you, the scholar. The issue became the money, and still to some degree is, the money that those scholarly publishers like Elsevier, Taylor and Francis, Sage, they make a lot of money off of content that they've received for free from faculty who, by and large, need to produce that research for their professional development. The other issue became, in certainly the 90s and into the early 2000s, the amount of money that those publishers were then charging primarily academic libraries to make those articles available to those who needed them. And the issue became lack of access on the part of researchers to those articles because the cost was prohibitive for the library to subscribe, and that became a big issue for library budgets, but also for researchers who then, through their own campus library, didn't have access to all this scholarly output that had been going on, was published, but then became unavailable. So that model then, that for-profit model, led to what we now have as an open access publishing model, where articles are published and made freely available because of online technology to anyone who needs them. So they're not behind a paywall at a publisher, they're freely available on the open web. So as it explains on the right-hand side of this slide, that traditional model of scholarly publishing had those drawbacks that I talked about, and still to some degree does. But open access publishing, on the flip side, can basically allows anyone to charge publication fees and upload articles to a website. And that's where the predatory publishing industry, if you want, comes in, is they can move into that space that anyone can make articles available online. So then they contact people and say, if you pay us this money, because legitimate open access publishing requires money up front to that open access publisher, to be paid to that open access publisher so they can do the work that's required to make information available online. Predatory publishers can do the same thing, but they're just taking the money and there's no quality control, and they'll just make articles available online and take the money. So there's profit being made on their end, but there's no quality that, at least to their credit, the for-profit publishers had built in their peer review processes. So they're called predatory because they're preying on this weakness in the open access publishing model, where anyone, not just someone who legitimately wants to make scholarly information available for free, anyone can do that and scoop the rewards. So I just want to stop there because that's a lot of information, and see if there are any questions or comments on where this where the issue has come from.
I see, Mike, you have Elsevier there.
Yeah.
Are you suggesting that that's predatory?
No. So I just took this infographic from something that the University of Southampton has put out. So it's just I used it as an example of the flowchart for the traditional scholarly publishing model, where the for-profit companies, and that's Elsevier is one example that they've used, they have tended, or they tended to keep the information that they made available behind a paywall. So it wasn't open access, although that's changing. So the infographic is the traditional for-profit publishers.
Okay.
Yeah, but in no way are they predatory in the sense that we're talking about predatory publishers who have no quality control. Elsevier has quality control. The predatory ones don't. Okay, so those publishers then who are profiting on people submitting articles, paying a publication fee up front, but not getting quality service for it, so not getting quality peer review, um, these predatory publishers are preying on a lot of things that occur among scholars, especially young scholars. So they're preying on inexperienced researchers who aren't aware of how scholarly publishing works and whether or not some opportunities to publish might be better for their reputations than others. So people who are inexperienced just wouldn't know about the levels of quality that are available for to publish their work. They're also preying on people's need to or desire to publish. So that might be a professional development need, or it might be a personal development need to see your work in print. It can be a very fast track to get your work published through a predatory publisher, but the quality of the peer review and the editing that a good publisher can offer won't be there. The middle graphic here shows another thing that these predatory publishers prey on is if people's work has been rejected by reputable journals, then they can get it published through a predatory journal. So predatory journals will publish lower quality work that has been rejected by others. A lot of times they will promise a very fast turnaround time. They'll say that their peer review process is, say, 2 weeks, when really a peer review process can take at least 3 months. And if you've had other experiences, I'll just pause there and see how long peer review has taken.
I had one take a year, and then I finally pulled it.
Yeah. Yeah, because what's happening in the background is the publisher is trying to line up other peers in your field, and they might be busy, unavailable. They'll get the manuscript to peer review, and then something will come up. So yeah, it can take, as you say, Madeline, a year. And then finally, research has shown that predatory publishers appeal to people's egos. If there's no risk of rejection, then there's no fear of being rejected. And that's an important factor as well that predatory journals are preying on. So then if we think about, in a sense, the opposite of a predatory journal, so we're thinking about reputable scholarly journals, what is it that we can look for in those? So a lot of points here. These points are covered in a handout that I'll recommend. But some of the things to look for include, first and foremost, a lot of scholarly journals that are reputable will be backed by a credible society or association. So look at the journal that you're considering and see if a reputable professional association in your field is actually the body behind that particular journal. I won't go through all of these factors, but there are a lot of things you can look for that a predatory journal wouldn't get a check mark beside if you're looking for them. Just over on the right-hand column, I just want to touch on the journal being indexed appropriately. So this is whether or not the articles from the journal are indexed in reputable databases such as Medline or CINAHL or Engineering Village for engineering. And if you kind of need help with that, librarians can certainly help you vet. Check into that, whether the journal that's contacting you is indexed appropriately. But as you can see, there are many ways to tell, or many things that may signal that a journal is not reputable, that it is a predatory journal. Is there a list of predatory journals? So you may have heard of Beall's list, and that was a list that a librarian in the US was maintaining online of predatory or suspected predatory journals, and then predatory publishers that may individually publish any number of suspect journals. Those lists became unavailable a couple of years ago, and there is a new list as you'll see here, the URL is predatoryjournals.com. I don't think that list has been updated for the last 2 years. I think somebody took Beal's list, reproduced it online, but then hasn't been able to maintain it for whatever reason. However, in addition to those factors that I touched on the previous slide, one thing you could do to check out a journal is look at this list and see if the journal that you're considering does appear on it. These are suspected predatory journals, so being on this list doesn't mean they're bad, but it means that you should certainly look further. And finally, is there a checklist? So I'm recommending a checklist that's made available from the University of Toronto. They make it available for reuse, copying by anyone, as long as attribution to University of Toronto is given. And as their handout says, it's a great 2-page handout. It says that there is no single criterion that points to whether or not a publication is legitimate. So you do need to weigh a number of factors when you're deciding whether to submit to a journal that is suspect, but it's a great handout that is available. The title is there, so you could Google identifying deceptive publishers, and chances are this University of Toronto PDF would be the first one that would come up. So that's the tool I'm recommending. And I will also mention, before I hand things over to Summer, on the flip side of things, if you want to find a journal to publish your work in, I have created a handout that's available through the CRIS resources that are available through our SharePoint site if you're a SAS Polytecher. So if you go to the CRIS site on our Collaborate, there is a handout there that can walk you through how to find a publisher, and those steps in theory would actually avoid you running into even a predatory journal that way. So I'll stop there before I hand things over to Summer, and if there are any questions, please feel free to open up your mic and I can see if I can answer them.
Thank you, Mike. If you have any questions, we have time for questions at the end. So I'm going to talk about questionable conferences. I know that all of us receive those emails about conferences and email. So it's a good exercise to identify those questionable conferences and try to avoid them. So why do we need to attend an academic conference? Basically, we attend academic conferences to stay connected with our peers. Publishing is one thing, but attending a conference is another thing. Usually when you publish, people tend to know you from distance. You don't get this interaction, whereas when attending conferences, you get this connection with people. You get to know faces, both faces for names. So it's very important to attend conferences to stay connected. Also, it's a good opportunity to get exposure. So people that know about your research or read maybe never sometimes knew about your publications. When you attend these events, it's a good opportunity to get exposure, and also it's a great opportunity to see what's going on, what other people are doing, learn about the cutting edge research that's going in your field. So it's attending conferences is another good opportunity to be known in your field and to get exposure and get to know other people who could become collaborators on your research. Yeah, next slide. So the main questions here is, are all conferences the same? No. Why they are not the same? Because questionable conferences are not intended for academic excellence. They are intended for profit. So they basically want to get your money. That's what they are after. Those conferences have collect their money through conferences fees, and as Mike said, the other way that these people make their money is through the open access publication. For conferences, they usually have high conferences fees that they collect from from people attending the conference. So questionable conferences usually are considered well organized events. They are not like, they use the money well, make a good organized event. They have big promises. They promise recognition, whereas their promises is just for collecting the money. It's not. They are organized well in terms of an event, but they are not organized well in terms of academic excellence. They have high fees, so they're after the money, as we said. And the main things that we look at is that they lack oversight and they have poor quality control. They basically accept almost everything, if not everything at all the time. And the way they play it is that they try to attract famous academics. They fell in their trap, and they present them beside low quality research. So if you want to attend a conference and you see a name that's a well recognized researcher, you might be attracted to go to this conference, whereas this conference is basically one of these questionable conferences that have low quality research presented. So to conclude about those conferences, we can summarize them as waste of time and waste of money. It's not worth attending these events because they will not move you ahead in your academic career. So how can you tell if this conference is a good conference, a conference that's recommended to attend, or if this is one of these questionable conferences? First of all, the name. You will see a flashy name, like the First World Conference in whatever. Locations. They usually look for these exotic locations, areas where everyone wants to go. Hong Kong, Thailand, Australia, India, whatever. They look for these kind of touristic locations. If they send it by email, their greetings will be not formal, sort of like, more friendly. Oh, greetings for the day or whatever. It's very friendly, not a professional one. If you look at their the sessions and or event itself, you will find that there are lots and lots of sessions, and there are multiple sessions running. That could be like, a huge number of sessions. Let's say like maybe around 30 sessions running in the same time to attract as many people as they can. And that's also reflected in the theme, in the overall theme. There is no theme for the conference. It targets broad number of audiences, and you can put it this way. I put it like, we are waiting we are writing to you because you are one of the leading experts in the field of, you write whatever field. We are open for business with everyone. So there is no theme, no goal, nothing clear. What is this conference actually is about? The invitation is not basically sent by a reputational international committee by non-scientists. It's just sent by the team, the organizing team, or something like that. It's not something that written by really a scientific committee. Next. Sorry. Mike, can you go to the next slide? Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry, it hasn't changed. I wonder if we're...
It's changed now, sorry.
Okay.
So another thing, same as with publications, the turnaround time is very quick. Usually you submit your abstract and then you hear an answer so quickly that there is no enough time to review it, and it sometimes could be within 24 hours. You just submit it, next day you get the approval. And editors, if you go to their website, the tricky thing about these conferences is that they have really good websites. They attract you by flashy and very nicely designed websites with lots of images. But when you go dig deep in their editor sections or organizer sections, you will find that people basically are located in one area, coming from one area or very close geographic area. The qualifications are not suitable to the event, and as we said, the event is like open to business, anything. So it becomes questionable when you look deep inside the website and look for who are the organizers, what are their credentials, and who are the editors. The other thing, which is another thing that's interesting about these conferences, is that they promise you lots of things in return of your money. So they say, like, you will have a prestigious glossy book, you will have a tour, you will be served whatever. So it's just like, it's we are giving you back lots of things for the money that you have bought, but only we are not, they don't say it, but I mean, but only we are not giving you what you're looking after, which is academic excellence. So we have to keep in mind one thing, is that these predatory conferences are now a huge number. There was some research that they basically outnumbered the official scholarly events. So if you see them a lot, that it's not that only you. They are out there, they are open for business, and they are outnumbering the number of scholarly and official events. So this is an interesting email that I got as I was searching the idea of questionable conferences. Is I got this email in my personal email that came on February 11th, and it's the title of the conference is International Conference. Now, the education that I had working through this presentation helped me identify that this conference is basically one of these questionable conferences. Look at the title, International Conference, and it's innovation practices in management, engineering, and social sciences. It's very broad. The location is Singapore. The name is flashy, the International Conference. Now, next slide, please. So if you look again on the rest of the email, so basically they cover areas, broad area, for the following broad areas: engineering and technology, business and economics, social sciences and humanities, education, physical life and health science, everything. So this basically very broad. It shows you that it doesn't make sense that the conference will be covering everything. And the other interesting thing is the mistake. The participants will be awarded complimentary. So there is a clear mistake in the writing of the email. And as I said, lots of free words, going to the Singapore Zoo and tour of the Singapore city. So all of these things are promises that these conferences provide. I actually went to their website and I was surprised. Very well organized, very well designed website, and they have lots of images and lots of things. So as I said, this is like the way that when you look at these conferences in this eye, you can identify what kind of a conference you are looking at. They didn't have the sessions, so I didn't know, but I'm guessing that down the road I'm gonna go on and check it, and this is gonna be an interesting example to see how the sessions are going to organize, because they have 5 actually large fields. Each of them is large enough to cover several fields that they are promoting this conference. And as you see, the signature is the AAST team. So as I said, these are just kind of some hints that can help you identify those questionable conferences. So how to limit those conferences? We all get them. So if you get those emails, avoid them. If you identify that this could be questionable conference, avoid forwarding this by email to your colleagues. Avoid talking about it. If you are looking into a conference, avoid going to these questionable conferences. There are lots of activities that people try to not to share those conferences so that they can limit their credibility. Now, if you have experienced one of these events, if you have attended one of these events and you discover that this is a questionable conference, share your experience. Tell your colleagues to avoid this, or go to the proper websites where you can actually post this conference as one of these questionable conferences. The idea is to limit those conferences. Now, how far can they go? This is a very well established scientist from the University of Oxford. His name is Graham Richard. And Mr. Richard was sitting one day in his office, and one of his colleagues came and said, "Oh, are you attending this conference, the iPharma? When is the conference?" I was like, what is that? And he was saying, "Oh, I saw your picture on their website. You were greeted, your picture is in the website. And they said that you will be organizing a session there." And he was like, "I didn't know about this. Where did it come from?" And so he went to their website and he found his picture greeting people in another conference that this iPharma had, photoshopped, that he never attended this conference. He never know about them. They even listed him as being an organizing committee. So this is how far they can go. They can take a well-known name and attach it to their conference and attract people this way by saying, "Oh, we have this very well-known scientist attending and actually one of the organizing committee." So you have, it becomes really difficult to, how can I tell if this person is attending or not if you don't know them personally? So this prof actually had the opportunity that someone told him about this. But sometimes those scientists, they might find their names in those conferences without them knowing. So there are several initiatives that are on the website and on the internet that you can search for these questionable conferences, and also publications in some cases. So there is a website called Think, Check, and Attend. They give you a checklist before you go to a conference. You can look at their checklist and see most of these things we addressed here, but they can tell you, go through one step by step, a long list where you can avoid these, can identify which conferences are questionable. There are some bloggers. One of them is called Dana Roth. He has a very long list of all these questionable conferences that you can go and check. So try to see if there are those kind of bloggers or websites where they list those conferences. And if you come across one of them, you can also add it. And there is the other one, Jeffrey, he lists all this predatory publication. So if you go to the website, to the internet, sometimes you will find good information. If you search the conference that you are targeting, you can tell if this one is listed as a questionable conference or not. So thank you, everyone. If you have any questions for me or Mike, just let us know. Please open your mic. So if you don't have questions now, or if you know of anyone who would be interested in identifying those predatory publications or conferences, please let them know about this presentation. It will be posted on the website, under Ori's website, team site. And if you have any questions, you can contact either me or Mike. And we hope that you don't get caught caught by those predatory publishers or conferences. Mike, if you want to say anything before we...
Thanks, Summer, just to say thanks to the participants, and yes, to echo what you've said, I'm available. My librarian colleagues are available as well if you have questions about predatory publications. And on the conferences side, absolutely, Summer can answer any of those questions and help you out in that regard. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.